All right, guys. So welcome to, well, it's not really a show, but what we're going to do is break down what we talked about in the most recent podcast episode of some of the biomechanics of the golf swing and generally just kind of how a golf swing should look, how it should feel, some of the main components. And what we're going to do, there's no better model for a golf swing than good old Rory McIlroy, who right now shot a 66 in the opening round of the Arnold Palmer Invitational, which is sick. Good man. And he's leading, by the way. And there's no better golf swing to really break down because it's just perfect. Just look at that. Just look at that setup to start. But yeah, Rory McIlroy, fantastic golf swing. So that's what we're going to break down. We're going to go over all the different components I laid out in the actual podcast episode. So if you haven't listened to that, go check it out. And I'm going to break it down more here, kind of highlight some stuff with the cursor here and go through it like that. All right. So just recapping the segments of the golf swing. So we have the setup, takeaway, backswing, transition, downswing, impact, follow through. So starting with Rory here. Let me see something quick. Okay, we're good. So starting with Rory, we start with the setup. So I talked about this on the podcast episode. It took me a while to get to the word routine. But you want a repeatable base, a repeatable routine that's going to allow you to essentially have the same swing over and over again. So what we're looking for here, besides a repeatable swing, is just really having the kind of feet about shoulder width apart, slight knee bend, about a 45 degree. It's a little bit of a knee bend there. About 45 degree bend at the waist, so lumbar spine. And then look at his lead foot. It's slightly towards the target. And everything else essentially falls into place after that. So then we take a look at the backswing. So the initial backswing, I talked about it a little bit in the actual podcast episode, and it sounded a little bit confusing. So essentially what's happening is your lagging foot causes a posterior force, so it's going to go back behind him, and then his front foot essentially is going to cause a force that makes it seem like obviously he's not spinning in a circle, but what his front foot is doing is it's more coming around this way. Back foot's around that way, front foot's around this way, which causes the hips to spin in this clockwise direction here, okay? So that's the start of the downswing there, and then we'll just take a look at it quick. So obviously it's difficult to see what exactly the ground reaction forces are doing, and that's not something that you would see, but what you can see is just going through that backswing again. You see the hips rotating, getting to that point there, and then we're going to stop it at that point. So looking at the top of the backswing, I'll just rewind it a little bit more. So he's not at the top of his backswing yet, but what we're looking at here, you want his lead arm, so Rory's left arm, you want it fully extended. He actually has a little bit of hyperextension in the elbow. So you see it's almost kind of bent inwards because it's super extended. And then his thoracic spine gets to be fully rotated out, so totally turned around. The pelvis is also rotated back. And also what I was talking about in the episode a little bit is the coupling of the pelvis rotation as well as the thoracic rotation here. And what I talked about is that you essentially want your thoracic spine and your upper body to rotate here double of what's going on down in your pelvis. So you look at it, we'll restart his backswing here a little bit. So that's rotating, pelvis is rotating, but thorax and upper body is rotating essentially double of what's going on at the pelvis. And like I talked about last night, not last night, but I did last night, but you're not going to know when I did this. So when I talked about this, we call it essentially the stretch shorten cycle of the muscles. So by locking the pelvis here with limited rotation, increasing the rotation of the torso, players can increase their swing speed, ball velocity, and thus distance, as pros are all at the tips of every golf course. So they take it to the tips, of course. So at this point, so his lats essentially attach to the shoulders, down on the pelvis, totally extended, very lengthened. Same thing with his opposite side. Glutes, same thing. So they're down here. They attach actually up in the back a little bit. So they're rotated as well. And then we have other things like the pecs and some other muscles that you can't really visualize as well. But at this point, everything is, again, pretty loaded up. Rory's ready to pounce. He's got driver in hand. He's gonna unload. So now we get to the downswing. And the downswing is initiated by, so we're looking at the quads right here on the back leg, and then his glutes on the other side, which you can't see. But what they're going to do here, you want this back leg to extend. And when it extends, so your glutes cause hip extension, which pulls your hips backwards, and your quadriceps will cause your knee to extend. So your knee's going to extend backwards, your hip's going to extend backwards. What that's going to do is force your pelvis and the hips forward towards the target, okay? So we're at Rory's top of his backswing right here, and then we're going to start the downswing. So just watch for the hips to move forward here. Coming forward, forward, forward. Boom. So see where they are right here, and then we'll rewind it to here. So let's watch again. Quads extend, hips extend, actually forces the hips and pelvis forward towards the target as we begin to shift that body weight from the back foot onto the lead foot, and we see where he is at that point. So what I discussed also there, and what we want, is if players, whether you're Rory McIlroy or just a regular amateur player, you really want to be able to activate these big muscles. So you think about your quads, like I said on the podcast, think about your quads, think about your glutes. They're some of the strongest, some of the biggest muscles in your body, and they can generate some of the most force of the entire body. 75% of golfers have this progression of loading up these muscles here. Like I was saying last night. As I was saying in the podcast, skilled golfers are going to be able to load up these essential muscles and be able to drive that and create that power on the downswing. So you really want to focus on being able to do that. And there's, like I said, I'm not a swing instructor. I can build up these muscles for you. But if you go to a TPI certified pro, they'll have drills that you can do that really activate these. But where I come in is I can help you strengthen these components to develop those muscles specifically into powerful muscles, so you can train them how you need them to be trained. So golf is an aerobic sport, sure, for walking. So you can do aerobic activity, ride a bike, stuff like that, take walks, run, but that's not going to help you a ton with building up power and increasing your distance for short bursts of energy where you need speed and strength, which gives you power. Those aerobic activities aren't going to do it for you. You need kind of plyometric activities, explosive activities that are going to give you the ability to really activate those muscles properly and lash at the ball, essentially. Okay, so that's where I can really help you guys out. Not a swing instructor, but can build you up to the point where you have the ability to use those muscles correctly before transitioning you over to a swing coach or Somebody that's going to give you lessons on your golf swing. All right. So now what we take a look at, so still on the downswing here. So we talked about these big muscles in the lower half of the body, but now let's take a look at how the rest of the body unwinds. So when it unwinds, we want to start with your thorax. So your T-spine here, move it to the shoulders, and then the wrists are going to come through, and then the club's finally going to come through. Okay? So we'll start out, we'll take a look at Rory. And like I said last night, God damn it. Not last night, on the podcast. It's proximal to distal, so in to out. Okay? So let's see Rory unload here. So back opens, shoulders open, wrists come through, hands come through, club, boom. Beaut. So let's check it out again. T-spine opens up, shoulders, hands, wrist, club, shazam. Just gaze at it. Just take a look at that swing. Oh no. Of course we're going to play that again. So let's get him back. Let's take him back to this point again. Before he unloads. Boom. Okay. Now, other part of the downswing that I talked about. You want your wrists, so let's bring it to the point where he gets there. You could see it a little bit better. Right. Kind of there, okay? So he has his thumbs, his wrists, they're in radial deviation, and I talked about that, so I'll talk about it again here quickly. So make a thumbs up, and then bring your thumbs back towards you. So that's radial deviation, okay? So thumbs up, then point your thumbs back at you. That's going to be radial deviation. So Rory's in that position, and we want you to keep that position as long as possible into the downswing. That's going to give you more angular velocity, greater swing speeds, greater ball speeds, and longer distance. Additionally, what you look for here is, so his right hand, it's going to turn over in a counterclockwise direction. The left wrist is going to turn over in a they're both going to turn over in a counterclockwise direction. But what they're going to do, so better way to say this, the right wrist, so the lagging wrist is going to turn palms down. The top wrist is going to, or the leading wrist is going to turn palm up, okay? So back wrist, palm down, pronation, lead wrist, palm up, supination. Okay, so let's watch that happen with Rory there. So you can see right at impact, they really turn over because he's able to keep that radial deviation, which we see much better here. Those wrists kind of cock back. And then once he gets to impact, really right there, we see those wrists start to turn over. We start to see that Nike symbol turn over until we can't see it anymore. And then the lag wrist and hand is actually over the leading wrist at that point as it totally turns over. So that's what we're looking for there. So we went over essentially the whole downswing at this point. So we went over what's going on at the hips here, quads, glutes activating, extension, causing the hips to come forward, which they are, coming forward towards the target. And then again, uncoiling of the upper body, thorax, shoulders, wrists, hands, club, wrists staying cocked to the point right at impact, essentially, as the wrists start to turn over, trying to keep them cocked as much as possible to and through impact. Even through impact, Rory still has them a little cocked there, and then you're going to turn them over so they are in an opposite direction as they were back here, okay? So that's the downswing. At impact. So let's get to impact. The pelvis has essentially rotated a total of 90 degrees. Is this the biggest thing? Like, do you really have to worry about this a ton? Like, how much is your pelvis rotating? Not so much, but that's essentially what it's doing. It should be, let's get right at impact. So your pelvis should be open to the target, which Rory's is. If it's closed off, you're going to push it. If it's too open, you can have really, like I said, I'm not a huge, big guy, or swing guy. I'm just breaking it down for you in the initial segment, so anything else go elsewhere, so I won't even get into that. But, so that's where we are at impact. Pelvis and thorax should be getting towards the target. Pelvis definitely is. Thorax is leading behind or lagging behind a little bit. But they're both rotating a total of at this point from around 90 to 100 degrees. Like I said, not the biggest point. After impact, we're going to look for his torso to continue to rotate around. The back is going to extend back this direction into a little bit of hyperextension. His trail shoulder, so right here, should be coming towards the target. Hands are going to come high above the head, and then that's where we're going to be. Okay, so let's try and get through that follow-through point. So upper body keeps rotating. His back is extending a little bit. He has this little bit of a reverse C position going. Trail shoulder pointing towards the target. Hands are way up here, and they're going to finish a little bit higher, right about there. And that is pretty, huh? A little reverse C position at the end. Looks good. So that's the big thing. Let's go through all of it one more time. Break it down. Impact. Repeatable point. A little bit of a lumbar spine bend here. So a little bit of a bend at the hips. Everything else falls into place. Front foot is rotated a little bit towards the target. As we start to come back, lead arm should be straight at the top of the backswing, which we have here. The torso, so thorax is rotated essentially double of what's going on at the hips to create that stretch shorten cycle, give us the most potential energy in our muscles, in the back, in the hips, to create the most powerful swing possible. As the downswing comes through, we're going to unload the hips, and then the torso, shoulders, hands, club. When we're here, before we totally come through, keeping those wrists in radial deviation to allow for the greatest kind of angular velocity, impact velocity, and ball speed after and through the swing. So not opening up those wrists or turning them over until we get through impact, which we see with Rory here. Eventually turning them over so the lag wrist is now on top of or rolled over the leading wrist. Okay. Reverse C. Back is extended a little bit. Hands are up high. Shoulder. Lag shoulder pointing towards the target. And that's just pretty. Okay. So if anybody has any questions on this, feel free to reach out. Like I said, I'm not the swing guy, but I can get you into a position where you can load up and get these muscles very strong, very powerful, do activities and exercises you need to do to develop that mobility in the legs, in the glutes, in your thorax, which is critical. We see how much of a rotational component the golf swing is. Rory getting totally turned around as much as you can to really create the most potential energy as he can throughout the swing. And not everybody has that. You're not just born with that type of mobility and flexibility, especially at a point that's relatively stable and doesn't do a ton of turning in the thoracic spine. Plenty of exercise that can be worked on to address your mobility here into the hips. So we need some internal, external rotation here. We need, you don't think about it a ton, but let's look at the wrist. How easy for it. If you're just getting into the game, I thought this was a no-brainer too. But try and keep your wrist cocked and do a full swing. If you're not used to doing it, your wrists are going to feel like they're going to break off when you're doing it. So wrist mobility, another huge thing, and that a lot of people don't even really think about. So lately, I always warm up my wrists when I'm doing any type of golf swing, any type of workout. Always working on the wrists. ESPN, sick. So we got the wrists, we got your back, we got shoulders, pecs, glutes, hip joint, internal, external rotation, ankles, knees. We got it all that we got to work on. Now, not everybody is going to have problems in these individual areas, but for me, for instance, I cannot turn this much because I messed up my shoulders benching. I didn't stretch at all until I got to PT school and after PT school. So I don't rotate like this. My wrist didn't work to this point of radial deviation here. So that's what I have to work on, as well as a little bit of internal rotation of my lead hip. But that's what I have to work on here. And that's a couple of things that I'm focusing on. But in the future, we're going to set up something that you can send in. Surprise, surprise, coming soon. We're going to set something up that you can send in videos. We can break down your swings and look at what needs to be done for your swing, just on some video analysis based on how your swing is, what your swing is telling us, and how you can improve your golf game. Okay, so that's coming in the future, not at the moment, but it is coming. That's going to be it. Let's finish off Rory's swing. We can't just leave it there. Love watching Rory swing. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Hope you guys got a good general breakdown of what the swing should look like, what some of the components have to do to create a powerful swing, how it really happens, and hope you guys got a little bit better of an idea after the podcast that I dropped the other day. It was last night, like I said 1,000 times, but yes, in the podcast. All right. So remember, any questions, feel free to reach out, subscribe, share, and see you next video. All right. Peace, guys.